All right, welcome everybody to a joint hearing of House Energy and Digital Infrastructure and Senate institutions. We are here today to learn a little bit more about one of our important IT projects that the state of Vermont is rolling out. And per our tradition on the House side, if it's okay with you guys, we usually introduce ourselves and then we ask everybody in the room to introduce themselves so we know who's here. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester.
Scott Campbell from St. Johnsbury.
Laura Sibilia from Wyndham 2.
Richard Bailey, Lamoille 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Karen Torrey, Washington 2.
Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2.
With that, so Wendy Harrison, Senator, at Wyndham District.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington.
And Rob Plunkett, Bennington Senate District.
Joe Major, Windsor.
Graham Klebner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
John Benson, Orange District. Russ Ingles, Essex District.
Super. And who do we have joining us today?
Hi, I'm Boyd Summers with Curran. Kevin Ellis, consultant.
Super.
David Reed Perry with Good Passenger.
Great.
Phil Barney with Building and General Services.
Okey doke.
Go, John Kelly. AES. Kevin Vianney with AES.
Yeah.
Sean Brown, Agency of Administration.
Super.
Justin Nelson, MMI.
Super. All righty, great. And it looks like we have the media here today as well. So we are probably ready to get started.
Yes.
Great. And we are going to be hearing first from Lisa Godwin, who's going to introduce herself for the record. And she has provided written testimony that we have just posted on our website. And I believe we have, and if we haven't, we'll forward that to members of our committee and to the committee as well. It's up on our website.
Trying to get rid of the echo.
And we're trying to get rid of the echo.
Yeah.
Let us know when you're ready to go ahead.
We have to talk in order for us to know whether there's an echo.
Right.
How's this? Good. No. This.
Alex, do you just keep talking so you can check the echo?
Yeah, I can't figure out what's going on. I just emailed.
Okay.
I turned off my mic.
Sure.
You don't have a do you?
Representative Feltus, I hate to put you on the spot. We're adhering to House tradition where I ask everybody who is with us today to introduce themselves, and you folks have just arrived. So we have been joined.
Representative Marty Feltus from Caledonia 3, member of the Appropriations.
Super.
James Duffy, joint fiscal office.
Great. Thanks a lot. We've got an echo on
It might be me.
our live stream that we're trying to figure out. As soon as we get that resolved, we're ready to go ahead. At least get introduced or something.
It's a lot of people been more than.
It's not to do with this.
You know, sounds like it's off.
So is it good?
There's now.
Okay, we're good. All right, everybody. All right, so thanks again for joining us. Sounds like we've got our tech resolved and we are ready for your testimony. If you could introduce yourself for the record.
Sure. My name is Lisa Gobbin. I'm the JFO IT consultant. So today we're talking about the ERP project. So what I have pulled together is just a revisit of the project description and background. the current status, which includes the recent changes the state announced to the implementation approach, some updates on the current financials for the project, and then an assessment of the change. And we also, I know Representative James, you had asked about some projects in other states, some workday implementation, so we can talk about that at the end, if that's okay.
Yep, that sounds good. And I forgot to ask, I'm sorry, we don't have it here, we don't have anything after this. Does the Senate have someplace you have to
Yes.
be?
Yes.
Where do you have to be?
2:45 down the hall.
Oh, great. Okay.
We thought this would go to 2:30.
Sounds good. That's what we were planning on too. And if it's okay with you, we usually ask questions as we go along.
Yes.
Okay. As you know.
Yes,
Yes.
I know. It's perfect. Okay. So this is, boy, talk about a basic rundown of what this project's about. The state's replacing 5 legacy systems with the Workday ERP. So that's the general description. And that includes the legacy budget system, which was called Vantage, the HR system, the statewide accounting and financial system we all know as Vision, and 2 additional legacy systems at the Department of Labor and the Department of Transportation. These were finance systems that when Vision was implemented, because of the level of granularity, they have to track their financial information for federal projects. It couldn't be incorporated into Vision completely. So that's why those are there.
I do have a question on this because I've used FARs and STARS and they're just brutal to use, but I had thought that it was a federal requirement.
It is.
So is it still a federal requirement?
Yes.
Because to me, legacy systems would be systems that we're not going to use anymore. But FARs and STARS, we are going to use, and maybe
You still have to track the data the same way. They
yes.
still have those requirements. I believe at AOT, it's tracking down to town boundary levels for their projects. And at Labor, it's some sort of DOL district that they have to track to.
Right.
But it's a different granularity, so it couldn't be originally incorporated into Vision, but those requirements stand, they're still federal.
Okay, so the requirements are there, but we won't need to use STARS, for example.
That's what the goal was.
Okay.
The stated business goal was to replace those systems.
Okay, and you're using past tense, but we'll hear about that later.
We'll get there.
So just to get everybody just level set across all of state government, we are replacing legacy systems that have been handling these different aspects with a central platform.
Correct.
Workday ERP.
So we'll get more into it, but it
Okay.
deals with depending on, you have to do an alignment. But this was the business case put forward by the state, the goal to replace these systems.
Okay.
So the current status, and again, it's a lot of work for 3 bullets. So there's a lot going on here. But the adaptive planning, which is the Workday module that is replacing the budget, what went live last fall. So that's, of course, you guys are very familiar with the budget. It's the tool that is used to pass the budgeting information to the legislature, to JFO at the start of every session. And they do a lot of planning. It takes a long time to build a budget. So that went live last fall in the Workday system. Next in the line for implementation was the HR module, and then to be followed by the financial module. Recently, the administration announced a plan to consolidate, instead of delivering the HR module first, to deliver the finance and HR modules together at a later date due to interdependencies that existed that they did not anticipate. And they believe that a continued rollout that was just a phased rollout would add complexity and likely require rework. So I don't disagree with that. I think there had to be some things they just didn't anticipate because of how the project was rolled out. And we identified some of these areas in the original review that JFO did.
Yeah.
And how was this brought to your attention?
Originally, we did hear, I met with Catherine Benham Sarah Clark and Denise Bradley Hughes. We had a meeting up front. They were giving us a heads up. And then they were going to discuss this with the chairs. And then later on, we were given a date, it was a Tuesday. They had expected, and I waited, I kept asking how the chair's been notified. And then I started to get some inquiries from members who had been contacted by the press with a memo that announced it to the project team. So that's all I know. And once I realized I'm for people, and an email went to some staffers at JFO that were basically discussing this. I was told, well, I guess it's out. And I sent a letter to, an email to the chairs of Senate Institution and the vice, to just give them a heads up. I'm assuming you have heard about this, but it's out, and I know people were talking about it generally, and so that's when I had sent the email.
Madam Chair, just a brief follow-up if I
Yeah.
may, and I will ask ADS this as well. Is that typical that, so you are receiving information or providing some oversight on behalf of the legislature? Is it typical that it would be ADS that would communicate with the chairs?
I think it was a courtesy to Catherine that we met to give her a heads up, given the concerns that we had around this project. But to be honest, looking back on it, I would probably rather not get the heads up or get the heads up when the chairs are notified, because I definitely felt like I was in a bit of a awkward situation, waiting for the notifications to happen, and we had agreed to that, and then not knowing whether they had or not.
So you had been asked to wait, to hold
Yeah,
off unless
to
the
let
chairs.
them
Okay,
contact them.
that was Mike. Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Rep. Campbell?
Could I ask, what was the timing of this? How long ago did all this take
Um,
place?
I don't remember the actual date that we had the discussion, but during the meeting, we were told the chairs will be, it was said the chairs would be notified by that Tuesday, which I believe was April 24th. And then,
Just the last few weeks.
yeah,
That's what I was wondering. I mean, the first thing that strikes me is, it seems amazing to have gotten this far into the project. I don't know how far into the project we are. You're going to talk about this, but and not realize that these two systems modules were so integrated. It seems like something that would be clearer earlier on, but get to comment right now, because we'll learn more.
we can move forward and talk about that.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Sorry, before we do move on,
okay.
you had mentioned your JFO's previous review of the project. And I was just trying to find it on the website. I'm wondering if that's something that is relevant that we should post with today's testimony.
I can send a link to it.
Okay. I know you've got the state IT and broadband page on the JFO site, and I was just looking to see if I didn't see it immediately. But maybe.
Yeah. I don't know what happened to some of the reviews that I posted. When I Google for them, I can find them on the JFO website, but they don't seem to be all in one place. And I'm not responsible for posting them. I deliver them to JFO.
No, yeah,
So,
we just always try to keep everything in one place.
I
So
appreciate
if you can send it along, we'll post it.
okay.
Okay.
Okay, so in order to start this conversation, I know you were curious to revisit the total appropriations that were made for this project. And it started off with the 12.8 that was really, I think it was one of the earlier requests. It was before I started with JFO the whole topic was to replace the HR system. It wasn't approached as we're going to do an ERP system. We need to replace the HR system. So the appropriation was made. And then for the FY 2023 for the budget adjustment, that's when they requested the money, the 11.8 for the finance module, and then said, look, we're going to do these all at once as an ERP system. And so that's where that's the current appropriations.
So,
Sorry.
Senator Harrison, no worries. So were these, was there an RFP for this? I mean,
There was an RFP done by the National Association for State Procurement Officials. And typically this organization will do, its states work together and they post an RFP. And then other states can buy off of that RFP, okay? If this organization didn't exist, you'd wonder why, because the goal is we can get better funding if people think, if vendors think that other states can just buy off this contract. So it's just a way to work as a group and get that pricing. The RFP for this project was completed under one called, it was posted as a cloud services contract. And the requirement for it was if you were a cloud services vendor and you met the definition of the NIST cloud services, you could apply to be part of this cloud services contract that states could purchase. Now, I do have the original RFP, which I downloaded, and Workday was the only ERP system that was part of that was listed. I have no way of knowing if another ERP system that met the definition of cloud services bid on that contract.
okay.
So that was interesting to me. And there was also, when the state does a bid like this, they'll have the functional requirements, the BGS will post it, BGS has their standards. They have the common standards for IT contracts, things like, 508 compliance, for example. And there were pieces of that in the NASBO bid, but when you looked at the contract after, the Workday contract that was part of this, the response, it said, you must be 508 compliance, but in the Workday contract, it said, basically, they didn't say they were 508 compliance. They said they didn't have the need to be 508 compliant. So there were things like that. And we're talking about a contract that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. And part of it, they were images, so they were difficult to search through and find. So I targeted a few things and moved on. My goal was to, make a note of that and then focus on the pieces that the state needed to be successful in order to implement this system. I typically don't second guess RFP choices of the state committees. That's really not my role. But I noted it as a concern, and it definitely contributed, in my opinion, later on to how prepared the state was to implement the system.
The RFP contributed.
Yes, because an RFP is more than something you post just so vendors can bid on it. When you develop an RFP and you go through the functional requirements, you typically, and what I mean by this, there's been some disagreement on whether what I'm promoting is an old methodology called waterfall, where you write these detailed requirements, tie yourself in knots, and then you're limiting what your choices are. But what I'm talking about are functional requirements. This is what the system needs to do. The system needs to be able to make payments to vendors, for example, that type of thing. So typically you're working with your program staff, you're going through, you're identifying all your requirements, and then you're reviewing the bids that come in. And through that process, you could consider it part of a change management process because you're bringing everybody along and you have a common understanding about what it is, what system that you're seeking. And it doesn't mean that all your requirements have to be met by a vendor, especially when you're converting old legacy systems into a new offering, because what you're looking for is the most cost-effective solution for the state of Vermont, so your cloud services, and where the edges of that are, where you might have needs for some of your legacy systems. So okay, so do we really need to do this function still? Is it required? And if it can't be done by this system, and yet most of it can be, it's good that we can align to a cloud services, but we still may need to address that gap somehow. And if you don't know where the gaps are, you don't know what the final cost is going to be, and you don't know how much this system will actually cover for those legacy apps. It could very well be that some of these functions that a legacy system does, you don't need to do anymore. Or you can do them in a more efficient way. I love the old Vermont saying, never pave a cow path, right? That's the same thing. You want to reassess it. And I love the RFP process. And the reason people do it, it's as much about bringing your people together and getting the wisdom from the program staff who know the business, who can document this. And after this, the contract can fall out of those requirements. You learn a lot when you're reviewing the RFP with your team and talking to the different vendors. And then, that falls into the contract. And then that contract information really helps you build your implementation plan. And it changes a lot. It matures a lot through that process. But I think this didn't set the state up for an easy path by just going forward and purchasing it in this way. And it meant that later on, it was a lot of work to bring your program people on board and have them understand what exactly would be accomplished by this.
I have a question about the financials. So we've spent a lot of time trying to learn about how, ADS and projects like this get budgeted for. And so the 24/6, that's appropriated, I remember, I think, at the outset of a project, and the money is set aside and it goes into the IT mod fund. This might be a question.
This was,
Sure, Riley, I'm just
so.
trying to remember. Okay.
I think
how we
it was
do
a
it.
mix because it started off with just an appropriation for that HR replacement. And then there was the 11.8, and then, let's reallocate it to an IT mod fund. And there were different changes throughout this.
Because I know we've been changing, so that's probably more for Secretary Riley, who's.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to remember whether we try to set it, I feel like we try to set aside the money for the whole scope of the project from the get-go. So I guess I'll ask you about that.
Well,
We can move on.
It's funny, one of my first conversations when I first started was with Representative Feltus, and I said, there's no way they're asking for enough money. And I mentioned that to then Secretary Quinn, who said, we are definitely asking for enough money. And I told him I would use bold print to apologize in my next report if that was the case, but I did not think there was enough money. But so, I wanted to start off with the appropriations that were made. And then I did submit a request to the state, and I requested a list of paid deliverables and also pending deliverables, and where we were with the budget, how much has been paid out and how much was left.
Sorry.
Yeah, just why did you think it wasn't enough? Sorry if that was really clear
Because-
for everyone else.
It's an enormous project, and these projects were typically running for other states. I couldn't find one for less than $80 million. So it didn't seem plausible. And I also didn't know where it was coming from. It didn't seem like there was enough information to really make that assessment.
Thank you.
So around the current status, and I received this last week. They listed at the state, and I haven't had much time to follow up on specific questions, so I wanted to report what they reported to me. There was an approved budget of 36 million, total invoice of 11.9 million, and I have more details on the next slide. There are some outstanding invoices, ones that were listed as not approved, but it said discussion. So that was 1.6, and with the total budget remaining of 22. Now, I know your question is going to be, I thought, okay, so we appropriated 24.6 and the approved budget is 36. I'm assuming we know they had other sources of funds they were tapping for this, and they can speak more to that.
Okay,
So, so when I look at what they've invoiced, they had 4.9 for Guidehouse, who was the implementation vendor. They're implementing Workday. And then the business process reengineering vendors, they started with one, had to change last year. So 647,000. So this is for, on the business side, to help them with developing their current state. What do they need to do? And also helping them develop new business processes based on what they're implementing. And then there was the CIO's independent review, which was $50,000. I used that to inform my review. They have contracted project management services, which have gone out kind of prior to the whole start of the project. And then ADS and Agency of Administration Business Staff. So the 1.6 are the invoices not yet approved, but pending.
I have a couple questions. So, Guidehouse, they're a third-party vendor that does sort of the nitty-gritty. Who's Guidehouse?
Guidehouse, they're the implementation vendor. So what they do is they facilitate the implementation of Workday. So they help the state facilitate how to configure Workday, because they're not reprogramming a new system, they're implementing Workday, but there's a lot of business rules that have to be worked through. They hold sessions, they actually configure the system to do what the state of Vermont needs it to do.
Okay, and then there's 1.6 in bills that have been submitted but not.
Yeah, and if you, hold on. So this is, oh, and we probably need to post this one too. I changed the colored cells in here where I made some notes. This is the file that ADS sent to me. So when we talk about, I just added some totals in here. This is the list of deliverables. So the green is the paid, this is Guidehouse. And then these items here were work completed for discussion. So it's something that was delivered but not yet accepted.
Okay,
And then the others are pending. You have kind of a monthly roll based on the current project plan. All of this is subject to change because they have to do an amendment based on the changes they want to make in the implementation.
I have some not well-formed questions related to Guidehouse. I know that there has been some reporting about our oversight and management of them, particularly related to FEMA and flood recovery. Do you have any sense of that, and if that is connected in any way to oversight and management of this?
I have no knowledge of that.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Couple questions about Guidehouse. So, do they actually, change the code if they need to?
No,
Does the state have access to the code?
no.
Okay,
This is a SaaS-based solution, so you don't own the code to create the solution in a product. You own the configuration, so you know all the configuration documented and you have rights to that documentation. So that will be all state data.
okay. So the data, but then the processes. Okay, that's helpful. Will we need Guidehouse forever, or is it just an implementation? And I don't mean to minimize the implementation because it's, the one number I saw was $29 million. So, and then there will be a cost to the state, I presume, annually, for, presuming that we get to a situation that we're happy with.
I'm sure Denise will speak to this, but part of what the state is trying to do is move to subscription services because it evens out the cost, so you don't get these big bumps in implementation costs every, you know, when the old time, you'd implement a system and then the clock was ticking, you know, how long will it stay up and when do I need to implement it if you can't upgrade it? So.
Right, but the benefit of that system is that you pay and then you're done, as opposed to paying to infinity.
It just, it's so expensive. So you're trying to,
Plus the
is there a way to
money
get to predictable, you know, a predictable cost versus, you know, and I think that's, but I want to speak for her.
Yes, and then we can have or not a balanced budget necessarily, it has to be balanced, but it's a regular budget amount that doesn't go up and down. And that's the benefit of that.
Yes.
And reliability in theory.
And we're a small state and it's not getting easier to hire staff. So having these systems is helpful.
Yeah. I don't know if you can answer this, Lisa, but back to the Guide House, who are they reporting to? And who is assessing whether or not they've delivered contracts
I think
or
the
contracts?
details on that is the project team.
Okay, so I can
I
hold.
think the project team is, and then if there's, I think based on the contract, if there's any discrepancies, it gets escalated to leadership.
Okay.
On whether someone thinks they should be paid and they're not to be paid. Okay, ready to move on?
Yeah,
All right.
so right.
So as I mentioned, there are other parts of the file that was provided by ADS. You know, the monthly projected payment schedule, et cetera. So there's more to it. So moving on to our concerns. You know, in the original review that we did, the JFO review of this project, in the overview, we listed 3 main issues. You know that within these, there were lots of examples that were provided, but there was the risk of functional gaps between Workday and the business needs. The risk related to unclear project definition, and also the lack of adherence to Workday recommendations for post-go live. This last one, it doesn't really come up in this discussion. It will come up later. It's really was the issue of during the review, the questions that I was asking about additional tenants. Tenants is a tenant in Workday for the cloud app. Vermont is sharing this application wherever it sits with other clients of Workday. And so Vermont's piece is referred to as a tenant. And when you're implementing a system, Workday gives you these different tenants. Like in the old world, it was, you'd get development and then you'd get test and you'd get production. So you would develop on development, move it to test. And if it passed all the tests, then you did your unit testing. And then, you know, along with the other pieces of the system, you would move it to production. So something similar is happening in Workday while you're under development. But as soon as you finish the project, those other tenants go away and you have to buy additional tenants. So if you want to do training on an ongoing basis, you have to buy a training tenant. If you want to do development and maybe, you know, like, for example, the budget when go live, what was included in the budget was the same functionality that was included in the other budget application. They refer to it as a minimal viable product. And so if there are other features of the budget that you want to implement later, you'd want to develop it and test and create those and test and then move it into your production tenant. So there are costs for those additional tenants. In the old world, you didn't pay separate licenses for production development. So that's sort of in the weeds, probably more than you wanted to know, but I just wanted to explain what that one was. But when I look at the changes and the rationale they gave to the changes, I can't disagree. I think they're right. They ran into issues that they didn't understand. And I think those are related to risk 1 and 2. You know, we didn't understand the functional gaps. There was unclear project definition at the onset of this project. And so they're running into like, oh no, we didn't realize these were so integrated. I don't think they could have known based on how this project was started. And they're left with the consequences of that. And I see these risks as ongoing. I don't think this is the last we'll see of these issues that come up. And I can give some examples. Some of them came from the project's own risk log. And I mentioned these to Jai Talk, and I think both committees this session. So
Can you,
there's,
sorry, before you go back, just for the layperson, can you just explain a little bit more about what you mean in points? Well, 1, 2, and 3, like functional gap between Workday, ERP, and business needs. What does that mean?
so for example, let's go back, remember the list of legacy systems I showed you earlier?
Yeah,
So stars and FARs. So there was no gap analysis of the differences, for example, in stars and FARs that never allowed them to be used in vision. So the work to identify whether or not they could actually be replaced using Workday, that work hasn't been done. It's going to be done, they said, in the discovery phases of this project. Okay, and so there's a lot of these. Now, the goal was to have Workday implemented, period. And yet there are pieces of these systems that may or not be met by Workday. The focus of the Guidehouse contract is to implement Workday, not assess all the functional areas for systems and whether or not they can be replaced in Workday. Guidehouse isn't digging those up. The other vendor now is.
Whose job is it to assess that?
It wasn't done. There was no gap analysis done between Workday. There was no list of functional needs compiled for this project. So that's kind of, those pieces, they're all unknown. We don't know what the gaps might be. And the opportunity for gaps is really, I can get into that more.
Perhaps Lydia's question was, whose job was it to identify these
Is it?
gaps?
Is present.
Is
Right
it?
now,
It's,
I would say it's a
Yes.
team is helping the state identify gaps. Because what they're doing, part of their contract now is to identify the current state.
there is Guidehouse.
Attain. Attain is the business process reengineering vendor. We talked about 2 contracts. Maybe I need to jump ahead.
Oh.
Yes, here, look, contract 1 and contract 2. Next slide. So this is where the rub is. I think, in my opinion, contract 1, in order to implement Workday, it assumes the requirements are known and stable, right? Contract 2, meanwhile, is identifying and documenting these requirements through the current state analysis. And that was added after the change in the vendors. So before, this wasn't done. So I'm assuming the business is like, oh, we haven't really compiled these. We need these in order to do this. But what you get as a result is it's like flying the plane while you're building it, right? Because your contract 2 is identifying all of this information and you have to coordinate carefully with your implementation vendor. But neither contract is responsible for resolving the functional gaps. So for instance, within the risk log, when I was doing an update for Jai Talk in the fall, it was noted that there was a risk that FARs and stars, and they were talking specifically of the time management system for stars, which is they log their time in a specific time management system, and then it's uploaded into stars and it somehow makes its way to payroll, et cetera, and labor has a similar thing. So it was noted that there was a risk that Workday couldn't be used for that purpose. And if Workday can't be used for the timesheet system for stars, how can it replace stars? So if you recall back in the JFO review that we did, we talked about kind of the, we talked about the risks related to this, and we created some recommended oversight activities. And this is where we looked at what the plan was, because we're saying, okay, we need to have a path forward on how we can follow up on these particular issues. And some of the oversight recommendations were, once we're out of the base camp phase, which is what they call the discovery phase, where they're documenting their requirements, we can understand where the gaps are. But, and, you know, we discussed this with the state, and they said that makes sense. We'll be done with the discovery phase in about 4 months. But when it came time to go back and conduct these activities, I was told, well, the base camp phase isn't going to end until, it might go well into UAT. User acceptance testing. So that's when you've paid for all your deliverables and you're now in testing. And to me, that seemed like, why, I mean, the assumption was, and we were told they would understand where the gaps were before that, but it seems like either they identified things, but they weren't willing to commit to saying they were gaps. And that maybe when they're actually developing them, they'll know whether they're a gap or not. But the problem is, all of these things just mean more money down the road. One of the things I noted in the review was that the guidehouse contract was really well done from the vendor. It was very boxed contract. It didn't have a lot of flexibility. So for example, once you accept one deliverable for the configuration, if you realize you left something out later and you want to add that, you're going to have to pay for that. And that's not abnormal, but the degree to which it was boxed, everything from you get only so many attempts to upload data, and then we're going to start charging you for additional attempts to upload data. So the whole contract was like that. It is what it is, but it's a risk when you're not really sure where the gaps are, because you really risk just a lot of costs.
So two contracts. The first contract was Workday. I mean, it's going to be very, very basic. Guidehouse.
Yeah.
For implementation
Yes.
of Workday. And then the second contract was this other firm called Attain.
Yes.
And that contract was also included, as your point 2 says, you're identifying and documenting gaps, which seems like something that should come before implementation. At least it seems that way. What's the time gap between Guidehouse's the state contracting with Guidehouse and the state contracting with Attain?
They're running concurrently.
So
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they don't.
both contracting at the same time, you're saying, or?
Yes. Well, we started off with one vendor before Attain that they, based on financial reasons, they left the project last year, and then Attain was brought on. I think the Attain seems like a good vendor from what I've heard, and the work that they're doing, I think. But it's just, I'm not sure how they're coordinating the timing of what they're doing versus what Guidehouse is doing. I'm sure there is some coordination, but it really does make it difficult. But the question is, what happens when you meet those gaps? And typically when you're doing requirements, I worked for a software vendor working for states and enterprise implementation too. And, typically you go through these requirement session and somebody raises, hey, what about this? And it doesn't necessarily fit. So you sort of make a note of it and move on. It'd be interesting to know what those notes are of the things that were encountered that were left unresolved and what the plan is for resolving them. Because the Workday contract isn't focused on resolving the state's problems for the gap. They're focused on implementing Workday. And I'm sure they are working hard to try and find a way to do all of this work. But
You said the Workday contract, you meant the
I'm sorry, Guidehouse, I'm doing it too. So the Guidehouse contract is really focused, is focused on implementing Workday. I don't know what happens when you run into that gap. I've heard that in some cases, the state development team might address it, but we don't know where those gaps are at all. So, it's a risk. They don't know either, because they're going through their requirements now. And none of the people that are here set this in motion, right? This was, I think I have no doubt everybody's working really hard to make this work. But the position that they've been placed in is a difficult one, and it's a difficult one to resolve. And I think that, they ran it, I have no doubt that I have no doubt the plan that they have will solve this problem of, unexpected integrations between the two systems. But it's the other problems that could come along and are likely to come along in a project like this.
But each one of these is another, is running the meter. It's another,
Yeah.
it's another add-on to the contract.
Yes. It could be, if it's a gap.
Yeah.
Right?
It sounds, yeah.
So, the issue, when we look, everything that was identified in the original review stands, those problems, challenges persist. But, so that includes what we were just talking about, the no plan to address the functional gaps. So who's going to do that? And how do you work through that? And the fact that although when we were talking about this project during the review presentation, we were told it absolutely can replace stars and bars. These risks are in the project documentation, and no one has said that they can't be replaced. They're saying that it's unclear, but it's my understanding that there are opinions that they can't be used. They can't be used to replace those systems. I don't know. I mean, we have to see the documentation, but it's not a hard yes like it was during the original JITAR presentation. Yes, we will do this. The other issue is the plan, at least now, was to implement 1 year of data into the data lake. And I haven't seen a plan to access the historical information, which is a lot of data. And I know business managers, when I run into an old business manager, and I've worked in state government for 17 years, I still know a lot of people. Say, how much data do you need? Like, how often do you access this? And it's, well, how long is the grant lifespan? Some of them, like I know at education, it was around, 3 years for a grant lifespan. What's the plan to access that data? Is the plan to keep PeopleSoft up so they'll be able to go and access it? All I've heard is a plan to use a data lake, but I haven't seen the plan. And I think we're at a point for a lot of this where this project has been going on for a while. There must be another plan. So either we're updating that, we're planning on keeping PeopleSoft up to allow access to those systems. What's the plan? I don't know. And this next bullet, I actually have a.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Who would know what the plan is?
The ADS will know what the plan is.
Oh.
The next bullet, I actually have a typo in where I say hundreds of systems integrated with vision. It meant I meant to write hundreds of integrations, system integrations. So in the actual RFP for the work that Guidehouse is doing, it listed a bunch of integrations that were included with the HR system and vision. And I can give you an example of one that I'm most familiar with in my time in state government, and that's within the vision system. It was a file spec and requirement called TipGap, and that's a batch payment integration. So although there's hundreds of integrations listed in that, this particular is one. I know with Agency of Education, I think there were 6 systems that use TipGap or processes that use TipGap. So think state aid for education, right? They need to make a payment. I'm not sure how many times a year it is now. I think it was 3 or 4 when I was there. But they need to make a payment. But the payment isn't just one payment per district. It could be thousands of payments based on the chart of accounts of the programs that are funding different payments for districts. So those are files that are uploaded. These are really old file formats. That one was this old fixed width file that has a header in it. The question is, for all of these integrations, do we know if changes will be need to made in the source systems that produce those files in order to produce one in the same format? And the answer is, I don't know how they can know unless they go through the process and looking at, what there's one file format for that, but can Workday read it or will something need to be done? So these are just areas where, when I was sitting and thinking about this over the weekend on examples of some of the risks that exist, this is what I was coming up with. And another one is there was a risk that was noted in the project team's risk that it was unsure whether, Workday typically integrates with systems that do payroll like ADP to produce the checks. But Vermont uses the state treasurer system, which is a system specific to them. Will they be able to meet that, or will there be changes required of those systems? So, go ahead.
We need to allow time for secretaries.
Yeah, so it sounds like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you agree with the decision to delay the launch of the first piece?
Well, I understand why they ran into it, but I expect they're going to run into more of this.
And so you're looking for, or advising us that we should be looking for, what's the plan here?
What's the
And keep
plan?
that.
And I think for all of these, maybe there is a plan
Okay.
for the data lake. Maybe all of this work is going on and there's a plan and they can show us. And I think, but we're at the point where, let's see it. Okay.
Thank you.
So the last bit was the other states, the issues that you had asked me about other states.
Right. I just want to make sure we allow time for Secretary Riley Hughes.
Do you
You
want,
say you have to wrap at 2:45?
We need to be in our other committee at 2:45.
Okay.
We can
We can
do
do that.
2:40.
We'll see if we have time. All right. Thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate it. I found the 2024 report. I'm sure it's the right one. And I sent it to you, Lisa. And to our committee assistant, just write back and say, yeah, that's the right one.
okay,
Before we post it.
will do.
And yeah, sorry to move. I just want to make sure we have time for Secretary Riley.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Hi. Hey, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon.
For the record, Denise Riley Hughes, Secretary for the Digital Services Agency.
Sean Brown, Deputy Secretary for the Agency of Administration.
Thank you for being here. All right, over to you.
I almost don't know where to start. So maybe you might want to kick things off because I think we plan to come in and talk about a status update of the project, not a relitigation of what we have talked about time and time again in testimony. So I definitely want to make sure I answer your questions. But maybe you might want to start because you made some pretty big, bold, positive decisions over the last month.
Sure. Just to provide some context for the committee, I was appointed Deputy Secretary in December of 24 and became involved in this project on a more day-to-day level beginning in the new year of 2025. Like January or February, and was asked to play a much larger role in the project, and currently and co-chair of the project leadership team that oversees the project. So that's my background and timeline of involvement with the project. So I'll be speaking from my perspective. I have historical knowledge, but definitely will be providing more from my participation in the project over the last year or so. We have made a lot of progress on this project. We successfully, as Lisa Govan indicated, implemented the adaptive planning, the new Vantage, replacing the Vantage system. We used that to develop the governor's proposed state fiscal year 27 budget that's before and under consideration by the legislature, and it received high marks from across the business managers and financial folks from across state government in terms of its ease of use and its ability to process data and information in real time, not have to push a button and wait for hours for it to run and process and then spit out a new result. So it's working well in supporting state government. So I feel like that's a success of the project as well. We also implemented
started to implement the first phase of what I would call the HCM, the BTHR, our HR system. We went through the discovery, what they called base camp, the discovery phases last winter and early spring. We then moved to the documenting and then moving into what we would call the design and configuration phase, which is where they start taking the information that we shared with them in terms of our requirements and what our systems do now, what we need this new system to do, and then configuring the Workday product. If you think about Workday, I'll use the analogy. Workday is this immense tool with immense capability. And if you were building a vehicle, you can use Workday to say, I want to build a sedan, or I want to build an SUV, or I want to build a delivery truck. And you would just configure that tool to create the vehicle and configure what you would need. And so that's the process we're going through. We need the system to do X, we need the system to do Y, and then they will take that tool and they will, Guidehouse, our implementation partner, will then configure the Workday product to meet our business needs. We then were moving into what we would call unit testing, where they would show us what they configured in terms of the data fields that we asked them, or the functionality we asked them, and then also the data elements that we needed in each field. We're in the process of what we call unit testing, very detailed work, going through very painstakingly each piece that they've configured, making sure it's what we asked them to configure, that the data that we need to be in that field was there. And if it's not there, we need to identify where it would come from, because we have lots of integrations, and then which is work that would then come in further testing where they would import those integrations into the system. And so we were at that stage of the project, coming towards the end of unit testing. When I will say, speaking from the business perspective, it was clear to us that there were a lot of dependencies on the financial system, and that we would require a lot of work to import and manually add data to the system and do workarounds until the second phase of the project came online, after this system went live. That had some concerns for the business side, that it would take a lot of time to maintain those workarounds. It was a risk where we could concern that we could not pay staff correctly, we could not track the cost allocations correctly without a lot of immense manual staff time tracking, like how do we draw down the Medicaid funds that support our healthcare staff? How do we draw down and track for our Three Squares Vermont program, or our heating assistance program? Understanding those systems very well, having been the deputy commissioner and commissioner at DCF, I have a very detailed knowledge of what we need to be able to draw down and track federal funds and report federal funds and go through audits of our federal and state partners who provide audits.
And it's important to note that it wasn't that the product itself or the solution wasn't going to meet the needs. It was focusing purely on the people and the process side of it, to say the risk of doing it this way would require a much more temporary, because it would be a 2-year, but temporary people effort in order to satisfy keeping things in a phased approach. And so this is how mature programs and projects operate, is that you take into account the things that you discover and learn along the way. And that's what was done. And that's where we're at right now, is looking at it from a project cycle, what is going to allow for the least amount of user impact while still maintaining focus on the outcome. Now, the outcome of our project is not implementing Workday. The outcome of the project is to have a modern ERP platform and system that meets the needs of state government. Because the current one that we're using and all of the other ancillary systems do not. So the integrations that you're hearing about, it's not hundreds, but we do have a lot of integrations. Many of them are batch files because that's the language that the current system speaks. When you look at how many of those environments we can retire with a more modern ERP system, we're going to be able to do that in a much easier way. And then taking a more, I think I've heard it Big Bang, we're calling it unified, single go live approach is going to allow us to keep focus on those outcomes on time and within the budget that we had projected. And I would encourage the members of the committees to read the independent review. So if the state invested $50,000 to have a third-party consultant do a full comprehensive review, which also included the procurement, and we've talked about this many times before, they have an assessment on that as well. That really gives you a holistic overview of what the purpose of the project is. This is published right on the ADS website. Why we're doing this, the demands, and there's been no ERP project that I believe you can find any customer, company, organization that's going to say it was easy. These are some of the most complex, challenging, and in some cases, risky projects. So we had hit an interesting point in the project where our user acceptance testing, that phase of the project, the timeline had exceeded, but the completion of the work had not. And with that consideration, at a project leadership level and an executive team level, we have to look at why. Why is this happening? And that's where the team, the project teams had come together and said, it's not an HCM decision, it's a finance decision, or the process is too integrated and we're going to have to go back and redo it later. And so a very mature organization would pivot and not focus on the project itself, but actually focus on the outcome and be ready to make shifts and adjustments in the project so that we don't sacrifice the outcome. That's what we would have done if we would sit here and say, well, we went in with a three-phased approach and we should stick with the three-phased approach regardless of how long it's going to take and how much money. This is now a sign of maturity, but also a sign of us all working together, which I think that really is what had started that $24 million number. That was implementation and licensing. That wasn't operating costs. That wasn't business process transformation. That wasn't a holistic view. That if you look at the IT report, the CIO's report, you'll see that that is a comprehensive look at the overall total of the project, which even with this central go live, we still maintain ourselves within. So this changeover allows us to meet the outcomes. It allows us to stay on time and allows us to stay within budget. So those are the things that from an oversight standpoint, we really want to make sure that we're doing. And we're doing so by listening to all of the agencies, not just a couple of people. I'm sure you can imagine in a state our size that you do have some people who are not happy about this because change is hard. But this is necessary for the operations and administration of state government.
I think Rep. Sebelia and Rep. Hefner.
Just actually, it would be helpful to me specifically. So when you're talking about the project, what do you mean when you say the project specifically?
Holistic.
So all 5 pieces.
Project.
So all 5 pieces.
There's no pieces. It's a holistic project. Are you talking about the existing systems that we're looking to include as part of the project? Yes, that's part of the project.
Well, what's the rest of the project?
It's a holistic, comprehensive project that is all of the processes that would be inclusive of human capital management and finance. So everything that goes into an ERP system, those are just the ones that we know by name. So at a top level, the AOA systems that will be decommissioned in the process are Vantage, which we've decommissioned, Vision, and BTHR. There are other systems that will be decommissioned. There will also be other procurements that will be terminated. So you have a couple of departments out there that are using QuickBooks to manage their financing because they can't manage it to the needs of what they have within Vision. So there's a lot of, we could either talk technical or we can talk business process, but there's a lot of challenges on both sides of those in the existing environment right now that is not meeting the needs of state government. So when we look at payroll, today in payroll, the finance component of payroll is critical to the agencies, making sure that it touches their department IDs, their cost centers, whether or not it's federal dollars, what the source of the funding is, and all of that is comprehensive of this, that the agencies aren't or are coming forward with the level of complexities that they need. That's incorporated into how we're moving forward with modernizing and modifying the processes. But payroll alone, every 2 weeks, in the current environment, we are basically shutting down state government to run payroll.
So I'm gonna beg your pardon, but
Sure.
Secretary Riley Hughes, I don't think I could explain to you simply or to my constituents what the project is. So my understanding of what the project is would be the replacement of those systems. And so when I ask you the question, it's a sincere question from a layperson. I don't understand what you mean, and I need to be able to explain it to my constituents.
Do you mind if I ask you a sincere question back?
Yes,
Have you read the independent review?
I have.
That doesn't give you an indication.
It was some time ago.
And I wanted to make sure that, I think I found it, and we'll post that along with our testimony today. It's independent review, enterprise resource planning system implementation written for the AOA. From Plant Moran. Is that the right one? 236 pages. I found the right one, right? Okay, we'll get it posted and we'll share it with you.
It's not simple. It is complex.
No, I just wanted to make sure I had
Yes.
the right link. Okay, Representative Kleppner.
Thank you. So, yes, ERP systems and implementations are notoriously complicated and expensive. I'm sure you've seen the same data I have that 70% of them fail or 80% of them fails in terms of coming in on time and on budget, and many of them never get implemented. I've done one ERP implementation and it probably took 20 years off my life, which may mean I'm dead already.
Taking note.
But I do wonder, so there are all these federal requirements that FARs and STARS are capable of meeting, that Vision was not capable of meeting. And I am wondering where the gap analysis of whether Workday can or cannot meet those requirements stands, and what the plan is for once you identify those gaps, how are we going to fill them, especially given what sounds like a pretty rigid contract with Guidehouse.
So STARS and FARS both came in at very different times, decades ago in their various times in state government. So when they were implemented at that point in time, they were implemented to meet federal requirements. Those federal requirements have changed dramatically, and those systems, I don't know if we have another 2 years on FARS. That is how concerned we are for the viability of being able to keep that system up and running. So the progress of the ERP project is going to be very critical to being able to retire that by 2028. So if we can't move forward on this project in the model with which we're trying to, that puts high risk for VDOL and high risk for them for not being able to meet federal requirements. So the risk analyses have been done, and the requirements have been documented, which phase in the project process. It's going to vary between HCM and finance. We're going to spend most of our time on the FARS piece within the finance modules. So those work streams up to date hadn't been started. With this new single go live approach, it allows us to kickstart that sooner rather than later, and also do that by making sure that we have the Department of Labor and the Department of Transportation at the table on day one to make sure that all those things are being handled. On the STARS side, that's a Department of an Agency of Transportation. I'm getting all my acronyms mixed up, by Agency of Transportation product. They are already in the process right now of planning the decommission. And we're also in the same challenge there, which is they've already identified, everything is documented. It's going to heavily go through the finance module. There was a component of it that went through the HCM around scheduling. And we've worked through some of those, but the maturity of what STARS does versus what VTHR and Vision do are night and day. And so that's one of the challenges that we were working through with AOT, is that if we went live with HCM and not the finance module, it would put them in a very challenging position with STARS of decoupling only certain processes and not others. So we were toying with, do we treat them separate? Do we not treat them separate? And so when we look at this from a, what's the right thing for the state, what's the right thing for the agencies, consolidating to that single go live actually benefits both of those, that agency and department, in the goals that they're trying to do. Where the risk now lies is timing, that if we can't get on board with this being the right thing for the state, which is what the experts are saying, but if we can't get the funding aligned properly, that puts us in an even greater challenge, because we are spending a lot of money to upkeep all of these systems right now, and none of them, I can confidently say, meet state government's needs.
If I made a quick follow-up, so it sounds like you have a clear understanding of the current federal requirements for these systems.
The appropriate members from those departments and agencies who are part of the project leadership team do, yes. And they are being represented in all of the work streams of the projects.
And where are you in terms of lining those requirements up against what Workday's capabilities are?
So we have worked with Workday, we have worked with the agencies, we have worked with the partners, and there is not one that we have come across that has not been able to be met by the existing environment that would be considered finance and HCM. There are a couple of project management needs that they have that are not inclusive of an ERP system that we're going to table. Because we didn't buy the project management module out of Workday, and we're not looking to buy anything extra where we're sitting at right now, but that's something that both of the AOT specifically, we have looked at, they have an existing system right now that can absorb some of those processes, so they're pretty confident with the plan that they have in place. And like I said, the risk that is the greatest to them right now is not meeting the timeline of 28.
Got it. So just to be sure I'm clear on this, all the federal requirements that you have looked at so far against Workday's capabilities, Workday is capable of managing.
Yes.
But there may be ones that you haven't looked at yet.
Not that we haven't looked at ones that are not considered ERP, like I said, on the project management side. But the ability for us to actually tie them in a much more simpler way exists far easier in the Workday system because of, I really try to avoid get too technical, but APIs. Being able to connect via API is going to be so much more advantageous to the state because we can do immediate data transfer. We can't do that today. And the VT Buys project is a perfect example of that. VT Buys project has not been as successful as it could have been for state government because of the need for batch file processing, not APIs. Vision can't receive APIs. So we're looking at POs that are getting added in and invoices that are getting sent regularly throughout the day. And we're sending multiple files back and forth to Vision, hoping that we can reconcile that. It's a bad model. And so until we move to a more modern system that can handle modern technology, even the VT Buys project itself has a chance of suffering because of it.
Thank you.
I have a question. Oh, I'm sorry, Brett Morrow.
Do we have where are we at with getting a handle on the final cost of this system?
So we have some finance estimates that I can share roughly verbally with you all, but we're also in negotiations of the amendment. So this change will require our first amendment with Guidehouse. And I don't want to put us at a disadvantage for showing that, but allows us to look at per fiscal year. We're looking at FY 28 at about $15 million of expenditures. Because we know from a date of where the deliverables are going to be required and when they're going to be required through the calendar year, that we'll expect to have those deliverables sent to us. And they roughly calculate to be about 15 million. In 28, we would be looking at 20 million because that's going to be the go live year. And so that's a catch up of all of the other deliverables. And basically it's the right away, immediately go live. And then you have your you can call it hypercare, you can call it maintenance period, where once you go live, you want to make sure that all the users have access. You make sure that you work out any bugs that may exist that you couldn't identify through testing. And then we would project that at the end of 28, we shouldn't see project costs unless we keep a business process transformation or another smaller contract out there, or we have a final contract that extends after July of 28, which would be in FY 29.
Yeah, so just with that 35 million you just mentioned, what would the total cost of the project be?
Something like that. Whatever we had on the projected, it's still within that.
Okay, and that would include stars and FARs.
That includes absorbing in the, yes. What it doesn't do is it doesn't take into account the current operating costs or technical costs of maintaining those current systems today. So we're not looking at offsetting those. This is purely just project costs. And those numbers aren't just tech costs. This is the first time in a project that we've actually included operating costs as well. So I mean, business, the business resource costs. So this does include that, which I think that we have done that in the past, not necessarily in testimony, but through AHS projects. AHS has done that when reporting to the federal government, but from an EDS project and an IT project specifically, this is the first time that we've looked holistically beyond just IT costs.
Do you know how much you're going to be offsetting roughly in terms of the cost of operating current legacy systems?
Based on projections right now, it's going to cost us a couple $1 million a year less to operate in this environment, which is what we're supposed to be doing by driving costs down and saving money for the state.
Great, thank you.
So I just had a question about the money as well. So I'm always thinking in terms of, do we need to prepare for any requests that are going to come to the legislature? So, we've appropriated 24.6 so far in the FY 22 and 23 big bill, and then the BAA. So I presume 24.6 was set aside somewhere for this project. And then I saw that the total approved budget, so we had that money set aside, total approved budget is 36 million. So I'm trying to square up the
difference.
Well, the difference between what we originally asked for and set aside, what the total budget is now, and then the additional future costs that you just mentioned.
And that was something that we've testified a lot in JI Talk. We've come to the committees. Lisa Gavin brought it up in her testimony as well, as we knew going in, we were not blind to that. And I can't speak to what occurred before I came to join state government. But we knew that the appropriations that were approved through JI Talk and the IT mod fund were not going to cover the cost of the project. We were very clear in that when we testified, when we got the approval through JI Talk, what we had said was, when we know when we're going to expend it in fiscal year, we will come to you. And knowing that we had, hopefully we will have again, the interest in the IT mod fund, that was the whole point of utilizing that interest. And so that was the hope, was to come through during session, once we had the specifics through the amendment, to ask for the utilization of the IT mod funds to cover the difference in FY 27 and a little bit in 28. And those funds are now at risk, and that puts this project at risk too. And so we don't want to ask for general fund. The whole intent of the IT mod fund was to find a source of dollars for IT projects without having to always go to the well. And this puts us in a really tough position for this project.
So you plan to go live,
July 1st, 28.
July 1st, 28. And obviously there were some things we probably would have done different.
I honestly can't say that because I don't think that we would have learned the necessary, when I say learned, not that we were not ready to learn them. If they're not documented, not project documentation, process documentation.
We're going to, I think
Yeah.
we're going to, when this goes live, I think it would be prudent to do an after action review. What we did right, what we did wrong, because if we are going to eventually do this again. And so I know it's, but it is, I mean, you have to do it now and it may be years in the future. But we are going to do this again. And so if we don't, so if we do some of the things right that we did right, and some of the things we had missteps on, I think it would be prudent of us to make sure that we document those things. So whomever, it may be you, it may not be you, we have that to be able to go forward and not make some of the missteps and do some of the things that we did right. Is that fair?
Absolutely, yes. And I agree wholeheartedly with you. We have an after action report that, especially for projects like this, we spend a lot of time completing and there's a sign off process on them. And then after action, that closeout report is going to be highly valuable here.
And I also would venture that we don't work in a silo, that we also, there may be other projects, other like projects that other departments may use that can glean off of that report. So thank you.
Yeah, on the kind of picking up Senator Major's other projects, are there other projects that are going to be implemented or that are going to be affected by this delay in consolidation? For instance,
Delay.
okay, there's no delay.
So our go live in the original project was July 1st, 28. Going with a single go live, our go live in the project is July 1st to 28. What we didn't do is we're not doing a point in time half step update. We're just going to do it all together. So there's no delay. And I think that that's an important distinction. I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
I would say one of the lessons learned is we're not operating in a vacuum. Other states are ahead of us in this endeavor. Some have been more successful than others. And so we have an opportunity to learn from those experiences in those other states. And then looking at those experiences, one of the things that has stood out for us is that testing is critically important and making sure you have enough runway and you're setting enough time aside for testing. And so that by shifting now, we want to provide more timeline for testing down the road than we currently have allocated. And by retooling our approach, it allows us to open up some of that testing timeframe because we have the unit testing that we were doing on the HCM side. So we want to shift to the financials, get that up, kind of caught up. And then we are able to do what we would call end-to-end testing together and making sure that both systems are working together and data is flowing back and forth. And that we're thinking we're getting the result we expect to get from that configuration and work, so that then we have the opportunity to take that result and then move into parallel testing where you run that system in parallel with your existing system. And so that you can test, because we know we're getting the right results in what we want to see from our current Oracle-based PeopleSoft system and our vision system. And so then we want to have enough runway so that we can do our parallel testing for several payroll cycles so that we can then take the results from those two and compare them. And if we're not seeing the same results, why? And so we have the opportunity to fix those before we go live, because what we're seeing in other states that have not provided that runway for those testing activities, have run into bigger hiccups than they anticipated in terms of staff not getting paid, cost allocations not happening. And that's something we do not want to experience and as a result of our project when we go live. So we want to make sure we have enough time allocated for those activities so that we get the results that we want to get at the end of the project.
Thank you. That was not my question, but I understand you're reacting to me calling this a delay. And so I think you are telling me that there's no time impact to the decision that the agency has made in terms of how this is rolling out. It's a testing impact process.
This actually improves it. This gives more time to the users who are going to be using it. This gives more time to the project staff. One of the things that Georgia did we've talked a lot about, the project leadership team and the executive team that your ESC has talked about, is they completed all of their configurations in January of this year. And then they gave 6 months for their entire user community, all the agencies, to go in and use the system and do the extra training over the course of 6 months. That was highly appealing to the agencies because if it's broken, we can fix it now. And one of the best practices of an ERP solution, especially in a complex environment like state government, is to go live on the start of a fiscal year. So July 1st being our start is critical. Any agency, or any state that you see doing something otherwise and then surprised when they have problems could be related to them trying to do this midstream. And so we want to be very mindful of that. So we're trying not to necessarily back into a corner. What we want to do is we want to back into the criticality of the business processes and the timing of all of this so that we start the fiscal year fresh.
I apologize. I feel like I haven't been clear about my question. So my question is about, does this shift, which I think I'm hearing being portrayed as saving time and keeping us on budget, does this shift have any downstream impact on other projects like CUS or integrated eligibility?
No.
Senator Plunkett?
So I just want to clarify the response.
Mhm.
The shift is shifting HCM. There's no HCM processes today that are tied to any of those.
Secretary Riley Hughes, what is HCM?
Sorry, human capital management.
Thank you.
People processes. They are not tied to any of the other systems. It's the finance processes that are. And so it actually gives us more time. It's more beneficial for us to do this because it allows us a more holistic view rather than a half view and then another half view. So we play catch up. That is going to cost us more money. So sticking with a multi-phased approach will absolutely cost the state money. This is the right way to go.
And it will not impact other IT projects like CWES and integrated eligibility.
Senator Plunkett?
And thank you for this. I've heard it's going to be on time, it's going to be on budget. And I appreciate they're going through all of this with us because the information that we got was piecemeal, unclear, and everything. So, and we had conversations with some folks about making sure that we had that information before it became something that was a surprise to us. And I feel like I should know this because of all of I've heard, but it's been a little while since I've been focused on this. So I did hear earlier, essentially hearing about a $10 million gap. And Secretary, you said that putting this project at risk. And can you explain what you mean by what that is? And tell us what we should be looking for to make sure that this project isn't at risk.
So the risk is the funding of the project. And so if we sweep funds that are in the IT mod fund, which is the source of most of the funding for this project, if we sweep the interest, it reduces the ability for us to utilize the financial availability to pay for the project.
If we have not appropriation of funds for a project and we, God forbid, can't pay for this, the risk and the downfall of that is far greater to the state, and we would have bigger problems.
Okay, so I think I do understand that. I did hear over the off session that you might be expecting a request for another appropriation. And that's the issue that you're pointing to.
Yes.
Yeah, and then I think we need to let our Senate compatriots go.
Yeah, so in terms of the IT mod funds and the interest, was that included in the governor's budget spending from that interest? Was that something that was presented to the appropriations committees, that those funds were necessary for this project this year, a set amount?
Was not outlined in that way in the governor's proposed budget, no.
So what's the plan? To pay for these things? Am I missing something?
We're hoping Senate's going to reinstate the interest in the fund, and that the interest is going to allow us to pay for.
So you're proposing that to Senate appropriations?
Well, at the time that the governor's proposed budget was being put together, we were on trajectory on the project. We were moving forward based on the funding that we had available and what the road ahead of us and the roadmap looked like. We believe we have enough funding to get through this upcoming budget cycle, but with the change in course, we now recognize we may not have all the funds we need currently, but that's the work that's happening now. We're working on the updated project plan and understanding how we might spend dollars differently than we had anticipated at the time the governor's proposed budget was put together. And at that point, once we had clarity on that, we were we would be engaging with the legislature on the path forward. We had recognized as a source of funds that $9.9 million of interest was in the fund, and recognizing we would have needed legislative authority to spend those funds on this project from the Tech Mod Fund. And we would have sought permission at some point to spend those funds. I think that's the point Secretary Riley Hughes is making, that I think there was an intention to use those funds on the project. Not there, we would need to make another ask of the legislature to understand how that would impact other areas of the budget moving forward, depending on the timing and the amount of money we may need. And we should know more in the coming weeks. We are working with our vendors. And I say vendors, Guidehouse, our implementation partner, and Attain, our business process transformation partner, on updating the project plan and retooling the timeline and understanding how that reshifts deliverables and how and when we would spend money versus how we had anticipated. And that should give us more clarity in the coming weeks on that, because then we would need to negotiate an amendment to the Guidehouse contract to comport with the new project plan and how we would align the project now.
Okay, so that ask is going to happen or happening?
I have can I try to summarize what I think? So it sounds like coming into this budget planning cycle, you knew you were going to need more money.
At some point in the future, beyond the 27 budget.
Okay, so you knew you were going to need more money because of the anticipated amendments to the contract, or the way. That's what I'm trying to think.
No, we only had $24 million appropriated for the project, so we know that the total cost of the project is more. It was about when we would need it.
When you would need it.
So going into this session, we did not have any visibility that we would need additional funds in 27.
Got it.
Until we started going through this process, which was after session had started, after the budget had been submitted. And
so as you started going through the process, you thought, oh, we are going to need more money this year.
This is great.
But we're okay because we've got the interest, the 9 million that's accumulated in the IT mod fund. So you knew you were going to need more money this year. You thought you were covered because of the interest that had been accruing in the IT mod fund. And then whoop, House appropriations swept the interest out of the mod fund and used it in different places in the budget, which is why we've passed the budget. So that's why the conversation has shifted to, you're trying to get that money back
Reinstated.
in the budget on the Senate side because you need it this year. Did I-
27.
In FY 27. And so those are conversations that are now happening with Senator Probst to try to get that changed. Did I get all that right?
Nailed it.
And the conversations are happening.
Yes.
Okay. That's helpful.
Yeah, let's start.
So when is this updated project plan? Goal, what's the date when you'll?
Yesterday. We've really been happy to have it done weeks ago, but
We've been having ongoing meetings online with our partners. We're to the point now where we have next week several all-day sessions scheduled here in Vermont with everyone's flying in, and we're doing intents to try to get to a point where we come to an agreement on that, and then that would inform contract amendment negotiations with Guidehouse, because we are going to have to do an amendment because this changes kind of what the original contract was negotiated in terms of the sequencing and the work of the project.
so yeah, the goal is, I shouldn't say the goal is, the work that you would see happen sooner is bringing the finance work streams sooner in the project than where they were. And so bringing them in sooner to line up with how far we've already come on the HCM side and then start moving together. So from a project standpoint, this is a similar path that I feel bad bringing up the name that Georgia had followed. And the reason why I bring up Georgia is we followed their project very, very closely. I meet with their CIO almost weekly. She has also said that if the committees ever would like to have her testify, because she's well far down the road, they already have everything fully configured, that she would be happy to testify in front of this committee. So her agency is similar to ADS. They are the oversight to the project. And we've been getting a lot of really positive feedback on the lessons learned, which is bring the agencies to the table early and often. That every voice needs to be at the table. And I think that that's what we've really worked hard over the last 8 months on, is making sure that everybody's voice is at the table. So you're starting to uncover and hear things. This is not a technology project. This is a government transformation project.
So just quickly, so, and they're using Workday as well. And are they using Guidehouse to implement it?
Nope, they have a different partner.
And how long, just quickly, how long has this been going? I seem to remember hearing about this 8 years ago when I was on energy and technology.
So we signed the contract this time last year with Guidehouse to do the implementation. But I think that the overall intent of moving forward has been years in the making.
Yeah.
The Workday contract, I think, was signed in 22. So Secretary Quinn's name was brought up in last testimony. It is going to be 4 years in September since he's been gone.
Okay.
So that goes to show we've
It's been a while.
done a lot of planning, a lot of thinking, and so now we're in the execution phase, and we really don't want to sacrifice the outcome by going backwards into the planning phase again, because I think we've done enough planning.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time. And I think we can go off live.